Hello, myself Professor S.D. Chavan, Professor in Physics, Department of Physics, DBF Dayanand College of Art and Science, Solapur. Now this video is for FET and BJT, that is field effect transistor and bipolar junction transistor. It gives a small idea by which we can compare the FET as well as with a BJT. Now, as far as the BJT, that is an ordinary transistor, when it is considered, there are two disadvantages that the BJT must have. The first disadvantage is that the BJT has a very low input impedance. Now, why the BJT has a very low input impedance? Because of the forward biased emitter junction. As we know that in case of BJT, there are three modes of operation: common base, common emitter and common collector. Out of these three modes, the common emitter is best suitable when we compare these three modes. And when we use common emitter mode, we can apply the input between the base and emitter, and the ordinary biasing in case of BJT is the emitter junction is always forward biased, whereas the collector junction is always reverse biased. This type of biasing is known as forward reverse biasing. So due to the forward biased emitter junction in case of BJT, the input impedance of BJT is very low. This is the disadvantage as we have pointed first. The second disadvantage that the BJT has is that in case of BJT there must be the considerable noise, and we know that in case of an amplifiers, when the transistor is used, the noise is one of the disadvantages. So if we are using any amplifier and the output of that amplifier is noisy, then we does not have a faithful amplification. So these are the two disadvantages that an ordinary transistor must have. But what about the FET, that is field effect transistor? Now in case of field effect transistor, exactly reverse to the BJT, that in case of FET, the FET must have a very large input impedance. Why the FET must have a very large input impedance? Because the input, because as the FET has a gate, source and the drain, and in that case we can apply the input between the gate and source. So the high input impedance in case of FET is because the input is always reverse bias. That means either the FET is N channel FET, or if it is a P channel FET, then we can apply the battery between the gate and source in such a way that these two terminals are always reverse bias, and due to the reverse bias input in case of FET, they has a very high input impedance, and this is an advantage of any device, that the device must have a very high input impedance and very low output impedance. So the FET is better than the BJT in that point. Now looking toward the second point, in case of FET, the FET is less noisy. That means the noise level at the output of FET is less as compared to the ordinary transistor. So when we compare these 2 points of disadvantage of BJT and the advantages of FET, by which we observe that FET is best than that of the BJT. Now if we go to the next part, in that case there will be a one point by which we can compare the BJT with an FET. that the BJT, that is bipolar junction transistor, is current controlled device. Why it is known as current controlled device? Because in BJT the output current, that is the collector current, as in case of common emitter mode, the output characteristics or output current of the device are controlled by the base current and not by the base voltage, because the collector current in case of common emitter mode is controlled by the base current, not by the base voltage, and due to that cause the output current is controlled by the input current. Due to that cause the BJT is known as current controlled device. But on the other hand, the FET is known as a voltage controlled device. Why the FET is known as voltage controlled device? Because in case of FET, the output characteristics, that is the drain current, that is to be controlled by the input voltage, not by the input current, because we can apply the reverse voltage between the gate and source, and this voltage they produces the electrical field between the gate and source, and then also this device is known as field effect transistor, because the effect of electrical field at the input between the gate and source control the output characteristics. That is, the output voltage is controlled, output current is controlled by the input voltage, and hence the device is known as FET. So by this video we can observe that there are few advantages that the FET must have over a BJT, and in most of the applications, in case of ICs, we use FET rather than using the BJT. The modified version of FET, that is MOSFET, is now used in most of the ICs, and this video is it gives an idea about how the FET is superior than that of the BJT. Now thank you very much for this video.